Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the main screen. He had been commander of this Earth Defense Force vessel for 3 years now and still loved the sight of deep space. His crew was small but good at their jobs. They were on a routine patrol near the outer colonies when everything went wrong. The attack came without warning. One moment they were cruising through empty space, and the next moment strange ships appeared around them. The alien vessels were huge and dark with designs Jake had never seen before. His communications officer Ryan Brooks tried to send a distress signal, but the aliens jammed all their transmissions. Dr. Lisa Carter rushed to the bridge from the medical bay. She looked worried as she watched the alien ships surround them. The ship's engineer Amy Foster was already working at her station, trying to boost their engines, but it was too late. The aliens had them trapped. Jake ordered his crew to prepare for battle, but their weapons did nothing against the alien shields. The enemy ships fired some kind of energy beam that shut down all their systems. The lights went out and emergency power kicked in, casting everything in a red glow. Within minutes, alien soldiers beamed aboard their ship. They were tall and thin with gray skin and large black eyes. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Jake tried to fight, but the aliens were too strong and too fast. They moved like they had done this many times before. The aliens rounded up Jake and his crew in the main cargo bay. There were 12 humans total, including Navigator Peter Hayes and Security Chief Carlos Rodriguez. The aliens spoke to each other in clicking sounds that made no sense to human ears. They seemed calm and organized, like this was just another day at work. One alien stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. His voice was cold and mechanical. He told them they were now prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake had heard rumors about the Zephyrians but thought they were just stories. Now he knew the stories were real. The alien who spoke English wore different armor than the others. He had strange symbols on his chest that probably meant he was their leader. He looked at the humans like they were insects under a microscope. He said his name was Vexara and he was a High Inquisitor. Vexara explained that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered many worlds. They did not destroy planets or kill populations. Instead, they broke the spirit of each species they found. Once a species lost hope, their worlds would surrender without a fight. It was clean and efficient. The humans would be taken to something called the Breaking Station. This was a special facility designed to crush the will of any living being. Vexara said they had files on human psychology and knew exactly how to break them. No species had ever resisted their methods. Jake looked at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were good people who had volunteered to protect Earth and its colonies. They would not give up. He tried to speak, but one of the alien guards hit him with an energy weapon that made his whole body go numb. The aliens forced them into a transport ship. The inside was cold and gray with no windows. They were locked in small cells barely big enough to stand up, and Jake could hear his crew in nearby cells but could not see them. The transport ship lifted off and jumped to faster than light speed. The journey took several days. The aliens gave them water and food that tasted like cardboard but kept them alive. They were not allowed to talk to each other. Guards watched them constantly through cameras in each cell. Jake spent the time thinking about his crew and wondering what would happen to them. Dr. Carter tried to check on everyone's health, but the guards stopped her. She was a good doctor who cared about people. Jake knew she would try to help others, even if it put her in danger. Amy Foster sat quietly in her cell, but Jake could see her studying the alien technology around them. She was always curious about how things worked. Ryan Brooks tapped messages on the walls of his cell using an old military code. Jake could hear the tapping and knew Ryan was trying to keep everyone connected. Security Chief Carlos Rodriguez stayed alert and ready for any chance to fight back. Navigator Peter Hayes seemed calm, but Jake knew he was planning something. When they finally arrived at the breaking station, Jake saw it through a small window in the transport. It was massive with dark metal walls and strange glowing symbols. It looked like a place designed to destroy hope. Ships from many different worlds were docked there. Jake realized they were not the only prisoners. The aliens marched them through long corridors filled with cells. Jake could see other beings from different planets locked behind energy barriers. Some looked broken and defeated. Others stared at nothing with empty eyes. This was what the Zephyrians did to entire species. They were brought to a processing area where alien technicians scanned them with strange devices. The machines recorded everything about their bodies and minds. Vex watched the process with satisfaction. He told Jake that within a few weeks they would be begging to surrender. Then recordings of their broken spirits would be sent to Earth. Jake looked at his crew one last time before they were separated. He saw courage in their faces despite their fear. These were humans, and humans did not break easily. The Zeph might think they knew everything about his species, but Jake suspected they were about to learn something new. The Zephyrians wasted no time beginning their work. Jake found himself alone in a white room with no windows and only one door. The walls seemed to glow with their own light, making it impossible to tell if it was day or night. He had no idea how long he had been there when the door finally opened. Vexera entered with 2 guards and a device that looked like a floating metal ball. The High Inquisitor sat across from Jake at a simple metal table. His large black eyes studied Jake's face, looking for signs of weakness. The floating device moved around the room, scanning everything with beams of blue light. Vexera began asking questions about Earth's military strength and colony locations. Jake gave only his name, rank, and serial number as military training required. The alien seemed amused by this response. He explained that Jake would eventually tell them everything they wanted to know. Every species did in the end. The interrogation lasted for hours. Vexera used different techniques to try to break Jake's resistance. Sometimes he was friendly and offered better food and conditions. Other times he became cold and threatening. He showed Jake images of other broken prisoners from different worlds to demonstrate what would happen if he did not cooperate. When Jake refused to answer, Vexera activated the floating device. It projected a hologram of Jake's crew in their cells. Jake could see that they were alive but looked tired and worried. The alien said that Jake's stubbornness was causing his friends to suffer. If he cooperated, his crew would be treated better. Jake felt anger rising in his chest but kept his face calm. He had been trained for this kind of psychological warfare. The aliens were trying to use his care for others against him. He looked directly at Vexera and said he had nothing to say. The High Inquisitor's expression did not change, but Jake sensed frustration. Meanwhile, Ryan Brooks had been placed in a cell with no light at all. The darkness was complete and the silence was overwhelming. This was sensory deprivation designed to break down a person's mind over time, but Ryan had prepared for this possibility during his military training. He began counting seconds to keep track of time and doing mental exercises to stay sharp. Ryan also started tapping messages on the walls using Morse code. The sound was quiet but carried through the metal structure of the station. Soon he heard tapping responses from other cells, whose crewmates were alive and fighting back in their own ways. The aliens had separated them to prevent communication, but humans were creative about staying connected. Dr. Carter was in a medical facility being forced to watch recordings of alien experiments on other species. The Zephyrians wanted her to see how helpless she was to prevent suffering. Instead, Carter studied the alien medical equipment around her. She was a doctor and could not stop herself from learning even in this terrible place. What surprised Carter was that some of the alien medical staff seemed uncomfortable with the experiments. When she asked one of them about a particular procedure, the alien looked away and did not answer. Carter realized that not all Zephyrians enjoyed causing pain. This gave her an idea about how to resist. Amy Foster found herself in a room filled with broken alien technology. The Zephyrians told her to fix the devices, but gave her no tools or instructions. This was meant to frustrate her and make her feel useless. Instead, Amy began studying how the alien technology worked. She had always been good at understanding machines, and these were just very advanced machines. The alien guards watched Amy work and seemed puzzled when she showed genuine interest in their technology. They expected her to be angry or depressed, but instead she was curious and focused. One guard asked her why she was not crying like other prisoners. Amy said she found alien engineering fascinating and wanted to learn more. Carlos Rodriguez was subjected to physical challenges designed to exhaust and humiliate him. The aliens made him run on a treadmill for hours or do exercises until he collapsed. But Carlos had been a security chief for years and was in excellent physical condition. What the aliens saw as punishment, he treated as training. Between exercise sessions, Carlos taught other prisoners techniques for staying strong under pressure. He shared breathing exercises and mental tricks he had learned from studying historical resistance movements. The alien guards could not understand why the other prisoners seemed to gain confidence instead of losing it. Peter Hayes was placed in a room where the gravity kept changing. Sometimes it was too heavy to move, and sometimes it was so light he floated helplessly. This was meant to make him feel out of control and powerless. But Peter had trained as a navigator and was used to different gravity conditions on various worlds. Peter began using the changing gravity to exercise different muscle groups. When gravity was heavy, he did strength training. When it was light, he practiced movement and coordination. He turned the torture into a game, and even started enjoying the challenge. The aliens monitoring him seemed confused by his positive attitude. After several days of interrogation, Vexthera met with other High Inquisitors to discuss the humans. They had expected the prisoners to show signs of breaking by now, but instead, they seemed to be adapting. The humans were responding to torture and isolation in ways no other species had. The other Inquisitors suggested increasing the pressure, but Vexthera was curious about these strange creatures. During his sessions with Jake, he had begun to notice something unusual. When Jake talked about his crew or his home world, his voice carried a strength that seemed to grow stronger under pressure. Jake had started telling Vexthera stories about human history during their sessions. He talked about people who had survived terrible conditions and still managed to help others. He described wars where ordinary people became heroes and disasters where communities came together. Vexthera found himself listening to these stories, even though they served no purpose for the interrogation. The alien High Inquisitor did not understand why Jake shared these tales. Other prisoners usually begged for mercy or tried to bargain for better treatment. Jake seemed to be trying to teach him something about human nature. It was unlike anything Vexthera had experienced in decades of breaking other species. Dr. Carter made contact with alien prisoners from other worlds in the medical facility. She began treating their injuries and illnesses using her human medical knowledge combined with alien equipment. The other prisoners had never seen a being from one species help members of another species voluntarily. Word began to spread through the breaking station about the strange human prisoners. Guards reported that the humans seemed to be getting stronger instead of weaker. They helped each other and even tried to help alien prisoners. This behavior did not match any patterns in the Zephyrian files about conquest psychology. 3 weeks into their imprisonment, the Zephyrians increased the intensity of their methods. They were confused and frustrated by the humans' unexpected resistance. Every other species they had encountered showed clear signs of breaking by this point, but the humans seemed to be growing stronger. Jake found himself spending longer periods with Vexthera. The High Inquisitor had moved beyond simple interrogation and was now trying more complex psychological techniques. He showed Jake recordings of Earth being attacked by Zephyrian forces and claimed his resistance was causing the destruction of human colonies. Instead of breaking down, Jake began telling more stories. He talked about the London Blitz during World War II, when ordinary people went to work every day while bombs fell around them. He described how communities helped each other during natural disasters, and how strangers became heroes when others needed help. Jake spoke about human resilience with such conviction that Vexthera found himself believing these tales. The alien began asking questions about these human stories. He wanted to understand how beings could maintain hope in hopeless situations. Jake explained that humans had learned throughout history that giving up was the only real defeat. As long as people kept trying and caring for each other, they could survive almost anything. Vexthera did not understand this concept. In Zen culture, strength came from dominance over others. The idea that strength could come from service and sacrifice was completely foreign to him. Yet he could see this strength in Jake, and it puzzled him greatly. Ryan Brooks had established a communication network throughout his section of the prison using Morse code and other techniques. He taught these methods to alien prisoners who had been broken by years of captivity. Slowly, these beings began to show signs of hope again as they realized they were not completely alone. The alien guards noticed that prisoners in Ryan's section were behaving differently. They seemed more alert, and some even started resisting minor orders. When the guards investigated, they found complex communication systems but could not understand how the prisoners had organized so quickly. Ryan had turned isolation into connection. Dr. Carter continued her medical work in the facility, treating both humans and aliens. She discovered that many of the alien prisoners suffered from depression and despair that went beyond their physical injuries. Carter began talking to them about hope and healing while she worked on their bodies. One alien prisoner asked Carter why she helped beings from other species when her own people were suffering. Carter explained that a doctor's duty was to heal whoever needed healing regardless of their race or species. She said that helping others was what made humans feel strong, not what made them feel weak. The alien medical staff watched Carter work with growing amazement. They had never seen a prisoner volunteer to help other prisoners, especially those from different worlds. Some of the alien doctors began asking Carter about human medical techniques and philosophy. They seemed genuinely interested in her compassionate approach to healing. Amy Foster had gained access to more complex alien technology by proving her skills with simpler devices. The aliens gave her broken equipment to repair as a form of mental torture. They expected her to become frustrated and give up when she could not understand the advanced systems. Instead, Amy approached each device like a puzzle to be solved. She worked methodically, learning how each component functioned and how they connected to create larger systems. Her genuine enthusiasm for learning impressed the alien technicians who supervised her work. They began explaining certain principles to help her succeed. Amy started sharing her knowledge with other prisoners, teaching them about alien technology and engineering. This information helped the prisoners understand their environment better and gave them a sense of control over their situation. The aliens had intended to make Amy feel helpless, but instead she was empowering others. Carlos Rodriguez had become an unofficial leader among the alien prisoners in his section. His calm strength and practical advice helped beings who had been broken for years to remember their dignity. Carlos taught them exercises and mental techniques for staying strong under pressure. The alien guards were disturbed to see prisoners they had considered completely broken beginning to stand straighter and look them in the eye. Carlos explained to these beings that their captors wanted them to forget they were worthy of respect. By remembering their worth, they were already winning a victory. Carlos also began organizing small acts of resistance throughout the prison. Nothing violent or destructive, but simple refusals to cooperate with unnecessary cruelty. When guards tried to humiliate prisoners, other inmates would distract them or create minor disruptions. These small victories built confidence among all the prisoners. Peter Hayes used his navigation skills to map the entire breaking station from memory. He studied guard rotations, shift changes, and the movement of ships in and out of the facility. Peter shared this information with other prisoners, helping them understand their environment better. Peter also started teaching other prisoners about Earth and human culture. He described human music, art, and literature to beings who had never heard of such things. These lessons gave the alien prisoners something beautiful to think about, instead of focusing only on their suffering. The alien guards reported to their supervisors that the prison sections containing humans had become much more difficult to manage. Prisoners who had been docile for years were now showing signs of resistance and hope. The humans seemed to be teaching other species how to fight back psychologically. Vexera met with the station commander to discuss the situation. They had never encountered a species that not only resisted breaking but actually helped other species resist as well. The humans were disrupting the carefully designed systems that had worked on hundreds of other worlds. The station commander suggested using more extreme methods, but Vexera was hesitant. His sessions with Jake had made him curious about human psychology. He wanted to understand what made these beings so different before resorting to more brutal techniques. During one interrogation session, Jake asked Vexera about Zephyrian culture and history. The alien was surprised by this question, since prisoners usually only begged for mercy or information about their fate. Jake seemed genuinely interested in learning about his captor's civilization. Vexera found himself describing Zephyrian society and their methods of conquest. Jake listened carefully and then asked why the Zephyrians chose to rule through fear instead of cooperation. He suggested that ruling through fear required constant vigilance, while leading through respect created lasting loyalty. This conversation troubled Vexera deeply. Jake was treating him like an equal worthy of discussion rather than an enemy to be feared. No prisoner had ever shown interest in Zephyrian culture or offered philosophical observations about their methods. The human was challenging everything Vexera believed about power and control. The alien began to look forward to his sessions with Jake, not for the interrogation but for the unexpected insights the human offered. Jake talked about leadership as service and strength as the ability to help others succeed. These concepts were revolutionary to a being raised in a culture based on dominance. Other High Inquisitors noticed that Vexera was spending more time with the human prisoners than necessary. They warned him about becoming too involved with the subjects, but Vexera could not explain his fascination. The humans were teaching him things about civilization that he had never considered before. 2 months had passed since the humans arrived at the breaking station, and everything was changing in ways the Zephyrians had never experienced. Vexera found himself looking forward to his daily sessions with Jake Morrison more than any other part of his duties. What had started as interrogation had become something closer to philosophical discussion. Jake continued sharing stories about human achievement and resilience, but now Vexera was asking questions about these tales. The alien wanted to understand how humans could find meaning in sacrifice and purpose in helping others. Jake explained that humans believed their greatest strength came not from what they could take but from what they could give. During one session, Jake told the story of a human teacher who had stayed behind to help students escape a burning school building. The teacher died but saved dozens of children. Vexthara asked why anyone would choose death over survival. Jake said that for humans, living with honor was more important than just living. This concept shook Vexthara to his core. In society, survival and dominance were the highest values. The idea that someone would voluntarily sacrifice themselves for others was not just foreign but seemed impossible. Yet Jake spoke of such acts as if they were common among humans. Vex began studying human history through the station's databases. He read about human wars and disasters but focused on stories of courage and compassion. He learned about humans who risked their lives to save strangers and communities that rebuilt after destruction. The pattern of human behavior was unlike anything he had encountered. Betty Walsh had been assigned to a research facility where alien scientists were trying to understand human psychology. They showed her their files on human culture and asked her to explain various aspects of human behavior. The aliens had focused on human conflicts and violence, missing the deeper patterns of cooperation and creativity. Betty began teaching the alien researchers about human art, music, and literature. She explained how humans used creativity to express emotions and share experiences across time and cultures. The aliens were fascinated by the concept of art as communication and connection rather than just decoration or status. One alien researcher asked Betty why humans created beauty when it served no practical purpose. Betty explained that beauty fed the human spirit and gave people hope during difficult times. She said that humans needed more than just food and shelter to thrive. They needed meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than themselves. The alien scientists began asking Betty to explain human poems, songs, and stories. They were particularly interested in tales of heroism and sacrifice that seemed to be common themes in human culture. Betty realized that the aliens were trying to understand what made humans different from other species they had conquered. Betty started a small library in her research facility using materials the aliens provided. She wrote down human stories, poems, and songs from memory and shared them with alien prisoners who could read. These beings had been broken for years but began showing interest in human culture and philosophy. Ryan Brooks had expanded his communication network to cover most of the prison complex. He was now in contact with prisoners from dozens of different species and had learned basic communication methods for several alien languages. Ryan was becoming a bridge between different groups of prisoners. The alien guards were frustrated by their inability to stop the communication network. Every time they thought they had found all the methods, the prisoners would develop new ones. Ryan had taught the inmates to be creative and adaptive in their resistance efforts. Ryan discovered that many of the alien species had rich cultural traditions that had been suppressed by their captivity. He encouraged these beings to share their own stories and customs, helping them remember who they were before they became prisoners. This cultural exchange gave everyone hope and purpose. Dr. Carter had become the unofficial medical officer for the entire prison complex. Both human and alien guards brought injured beings to her for treatment. Carter never refused to help anyone, regardless of their species or allegiance. Her reputation for compassion and skill had spread throughout the station. The alien medical staff began learning from Carter's techniques and philosophy. They were impressed by her ability to treat not just physical injuries, but also the psychological wounds that came from long imprisonment. Carter taught them that healing required treating the whole being, not just the damaged parts. Carter started training other prisoners in basic medical care so they could help each other when she was not available. This network of caregivers reduced suffering throughout the prison and gave many beings a sense of purpose. The aliens had never seen prisoners voluntarily take responsibility for others' welfare. Amy Foster had gained access to some of the station's most advanced technology. The alien engineers had been so impressed by her skills that they began consulting with her on technical problems. Amy was solving engineering challenges that had puzzled the Zephyrians for years. Amy used her position to improve conditions for prisoners throughout the station. She suggested modifications to life support systems that made the cells more comfortable and designed communication devices that helped isolated prisoners stay connected. Every improvement she made benefited beings beyond just herself. The alien engineers began asking Amy about human technology and engineering philosophy. They were curious about how humans approached problem-solving and innovation. Amy explained that humans believed the best solutions came from collaboration and that diversity of thought led to better outcomes. Carlos Rodriguez had become a leader, not just among human prisoners but among all the inmates in his section. Beings from different species looked to him for guidance and support. Carlos taught them that dignity could not be taken away. It could only be surrendered. Carlos organized the prisoners into support groups where beings could share their experiences and help each other cope with captivity. These groups became sources of strength and hope for creatures who had been isolated and broken. The alien guards watched with amazement as their most defeated prisoners began showing signs of recovery. The techniques Carlos taught for mental and physical resistance began spreading to other sections of the prison. Guards reported that prisoners throughout the facility were becoming more difficult to manage. What had started with 12 humans was now affecting thousands of beings from dozens of species. Peter Hayes had mapped not just the physical layout of the station but also its social and political structure. He understood how the Zephyrian hierarchy worked and had identified which aliens might be open to change. Peter began having conversations with guards and technicians who seemed uncomfortable with their duties. Peter discovered that many lower-ranking Zephyrians had doubts about their Empire's methods but had never been exposed to alternatives. He shared human concepts of leadership and governance that emphasized service rather than dominance. Some aliens began asking questions about these ideas. The information Peter gathered helped all the prisoners understand their captors better. He taught them to recognize which aliens might be sympathetic and how to approach them safely. This intelligence network made resistance efforts more effective and reduced dangerous confrontations. Vexthera realized that something fundamental had changed in his own thinking. He no longer saw the humans as subjects to be broken but as teachers offering lessons about civilization itself. The High Inquisitor began questioning everything he had believed about power, authority, and the nature of strength. During one session, Jake asked Vexthera what he hoped to achieve in his life beyond just following orders. The alien had never considered this question before. Jake suggested that true satisfaction came from helping others achieve their potential rather than crushing their spirits. That this conversation kept Vexthera awake for days. He began observing how the humans interacted with other prisoners and with their guards. Everywhere he looked, he saw examples of strength through service and power through compassion. The humans were demonstrating a completely different way of existing. Reports from the breaking station had reached the highest levels of the Zephyrian Empire, and the response was one of complete bewilderment. Never in their centuries of conquest had a species not only resisted breaking but actually begun to influence their captors. Emergency meetings were called on the Zephyrian homeworld to discuss what they were calling the human problem. High Command sent additional Inquisitors to the breaking station with orders to use more extreme methods. They could not allow news of the humans' resistance to spread to other conquered species. If word got out that the Zephyrian system could be challenged, their entire empire might face rebellion. But when the new Inquisitors arrived, they found a situation unlike anything. In their training, the prison guards were requesting transfers not because they feared the prisoners, but because they were beginning to question their own roles. Several guards had asked to speak with the humans about their philosophies, and some had even started showing mercy to other prisoners. Vexthera was called before a tribunal of High Inquisitors to explain his failure to break the human prisoners. They accused him of becoming too attached to the subjects and losing his objectivity. Vexthera tried to explain that the humans were unlike any species they had encountered, but his colleagues dismissed his observations. The tribunal ordered Vexthera to demonstrate Zephyrian authority by using the other alien prisoners as leverage against the humans. If Jake and his crew would not break from personal torture, perhaps they would surrender to save beings from other species. This strategy had worked before when dealing with empathetic races. Vexthera reluctantly agreed to the plan, though something deep inside him rebelled against the idea. He had come to respect Jake and his crew, and the thought of using innocent beings to hurt them felt wrong. These feelings confused and disturbed the High Inquisitor, who had never experienced such doubts before. The Zephyrians gathered a group of the most broken alien prisoners and brought them to a large chamber where the humans could see them. These beings had been captives for years and showed clear signs of psychological damage. The aliens planned to torture these prisoners until the humans agreed to cooperate. Jake and his crew were forced to watch as the Zephyrian guards prepared to hurt the alien prisoners. The humans could see the fear and despair in the eyes of beings who had already suffered more than anyone should endure. The guards waited for the humans to beg them to stop and offer to surrender. Instead, something remarkable happened. Jake stepped forward and volunteered to take the punishment meant for the alien prisoners. He said that if the Zephyrians wanted to hurt someone, they should hurt him, not beings who had already been broken. His crew immediately echoed his offer. each volunteering to suffer instead of watching others be tortured. Dr. Carter pushed past the guards and began examining the alien prisoners, checking their injuries and offering comfort. She ignored the weapons pointed at her and focused entirely on providing medical care. Ryan Brooks started speaking to the prisoners in their own languages, offering words of encouragement and support. Amy Foster began arguing with the guards about the technical specifications of their torture devices, claiming they were inefficient and poorly designed. She distracted the aliens with technical discussions, while Carlos Rodriguez positioned himself between the guards and the prisoners, ready to fight if necessary. Peter Hayes started telling the alien prisoners stories about hope and resistance from human history. He spoke about people who had survived terrible ordeals and found meaning in their suffering. His words carried such conviction that even the guards stopped to listen. The Zephyrian plan had backfired completely. Instead of using the alien prisoners as leverage, they had provided the humans with an opportunity to demonstrate their values. The broken prisoners looked at the humans with amazement and growing hope. No one had ever volunteered to suffer for them before. Vextara watched this scene with a mixture of awe and growing understanding. The humans were not just talking about compassion and sacrifice, they were living these principles even when it cost them dearly. Their strength came from their willingness to put others before themselves. The other High Inquisitors were furious at this development. They ordered the guards to punish both the humans and the alien prisoners, but found that many guards were reluctant to follow these orders. The humans' example had affected even their captors, and some aliens were beginning to question the morality of their actions. Word of the humans' sacrifice spread throughout the breaking station within hours. Prisoners who had given up hope years ago began talking about the beings who had volunteered to suffer for strangers. The story grew with each telling, and soon every prisoner in the facility knew about human compassion. The alien guards found themselves facing a crisis they had never encountered. Prisoners throughout the station were no longer passively accepting their treatment. Inspired by the human example, beings from dozens of species began showing small acts of resistance and mutual support. Some guards reported that they could no longer perform their duties effectively. The humans had made them question what they were doing and why they were doing it. Several guards requested reassignment to other duties, claiming they had lost the ability to inflict suffering on helpless beings. Vextera found himself in an impossible position. His superiors demanded that he break the humans by any means necessary, but every interaction with Jake and his crew made him more certain that breaking them would be wrong. The humans had shown him a different way of thinking about strength and leadership. During what would be their final formal interrogation session, Jake asked Vextera a simple question. He wanted to know if the High Inquisitor was proud of the work he did, and if he believed it made the galaxy a better place. Vextara found that he could not answer because he was no longer sure what he believed. Jake told Vextara that every being had the potential for good, but that potential had to be chosen freely. He said that the Zephyrian methods created fear and resentment, which eventually led to rebellion and chaos. True leadership inspired others to be their best selves, rather than forcing them to submit. Vextera asked Jake what would happen if the Zephyrians simply released all their prisoners and abandoned their conquest methods. Jake smiled and said that many species would probably offer to work with the Zephyrians voluntarily if they were treated as equals rather than subjects. This idea seemed impossible to Vextera, but he could not stop thinking about it. The humans had transformed the breaking station from a place of despair into something resembling a community. They had done this not through force, but through example and genuine care for others. The High Inquisitor realized that the humans had already won. They had not been broken, and they had inspired others to resist breaking. More importantly, they had shown Vextera and many other Zephyrians that there was an alternative to ruling through fear. Betty Walsh had continued her cultural education program and now had alien researchers throughout the station reading human literature and discussing human philosophy. These beings were beginning to understand that civilization could be measured by how a society treated its weakest members rather than by its military strength. The alien scientists asked Betty what humans would do if they had the power that the Zephyrian Empire possessed. Betty explained that humans would probably try to learn from other species and share knowledge rather than conquering and controlling them. She said that diversity made civilization stronger, not weaker. The research staff began documenting human culture and philosophy with the same intensity they had once used to study human weaknesses. They were discovering that the humans' greatest strength was their capacity for growth, and their willingness to change when they learned better ways of doing things. The crisis came without warning during the third month of the humans' imprisonment. A massive system failure cascaded through the breaking station's main power grid, causing explosions in several sections and threatening the life support for thousands of prisoners and staff. Emergency lights flickered on as alarms blared throughout the facility. The Zephyrian crew panicked as they had never faced such a catastrophic failure before. Their rigid hierarchy and fear-based culture had not prepared them for a situation requiring creative problem-solving and rapid adaptation. Guards abandoned their posts and technicians fled from damaged areas, leaving prisoners trapped in failing systems. Jake and his crew heard the explosions and felt the station shudder around them. Without hesitation, they began working to free themselves and other prisoners from cells that were losing power and life support. Amy Foster used her knowledge of alien technology to override failing security systems, while Carlos Rodriguez organized evacuation efforts. Dr. Carter immediately began treating injured beings as they escaped from damaged sections. She set up a medical station in one of the safer areas and worked alongside alien medical staff who had never seen such calm efficiency during a crisis. Carter's leadership gave the alien doctors confidence to continue working despite the chaos. Ryan Brooks established communication between different parts of the station using the networks he had built over months of imprisonment. He coordinated rescue efforts and helped direct people away from the most dangerous areas. The communication system that had started as resistance became the foundation for survival. Peter Hayes used his maps of the station to guide rescue teams to trapped prisoners and identify the safest evacuation routes. His navigation skills and detailed knowledge of the facility proved invaluable as traditional guidance systems failed throughout the station. Vic Staurer found himself following Jake's lead as they worked together to reach prisoners trapped in the deepest parts of the station. The High Inquisitor had never seen leadership like this before. Jake made decisions quickly but always considered the safety of others first. He inspired confidence without using threats or intimidation. Amy Foster worked alongside Zephyrian engineers to stabilize the station's main reactor. The alien technicians were amazed by her intuitive understanding of their systems and her ability to improvise solutions under pressure. She solved problems in minutes that might have taken their best engineers hours to figure out. The human engineer explained her thinking to the alien technicians as they worked, helping them understand new approaches to problem solving. Amy showed them that sometimes the best solutions came from combining different perspectives and trying unconventional methods. Dr. Carter found herself treating Zephyrian guards and staff alongside alien prisoners with no distinction between captors and captives. She organized medical teams that included beings from multiple species working together to save lives. The crisis had broken down the artificial barriers that separated different groups. One injured Zephyrian guard asked Carter why she was helping him when his people had tortured her and her friends. Carter said that during a crisis, everyone was just a person who needed help. She explained that healing was about making things better, not settling old scores. Carlos Rodriguez led mixed teams of humans, aliens, and even some Zephyrian guards in dangerous rescue operations. His calm leadership and practical approach gave everyone confidence that they could succeed. Carlos treated every being as a valuable team member regardless of their species or previous role. The security chief taught rapid rescue techniques to volunteers from all species, showing them how to work together effectively under pressure. Beings who had been enemies hours before were now risking their lives to save each other. Ryan Brooks coordinated the overall rescue effort from a central communication post. He maintained contact with teams throughout the station, providing information and support as needed. The aliens marveled at his ability to keep track of dozens of simultaneous operations while staying calm under extreme pressure. Betty Walsh worked with alien researchers to analyze the system failures and prevent further damage. Her understanding of both human and alien technology helped the teams develop solutions that neither species could have created alone. The crisis was demonstrating the value of cooperation and diverse perspectives. Peter Hayes guided the final evacuation efforts as the most damaged sections of the station became uninhabitable. He ensured that every being was accounted for and that no one was left behind. The navigator's thoroughness and attention to detail saved lives that might otherwise have been lost. As the immediate crisis passed and the station stabilized, Vex looked around at the mixed groups of humans, aliens, and Zephyrians working together. The rigid hierarchy that had defined his entire life had dissolved in the face of genuine emergency. Everyone had simply done what needed to be done, regardless of rank or species. The High Inquisitor realized that he had just witnessed something Unprecedented in Zephyrian history, the humans had not only led the rescue efforts but had inspired everyone around them to work together effectively. They had turned a potential disaster into a demonstration of what cooperation could achieve. Made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months before. He ordered the immediate release of all human prisoners and requested that they remain on the station as advisors and teachers. The other High Inquisitors were outraged, but Vextara no longer cared about their approval. Jake accepted the offer, but insisted that all prisoners on the station be released, regardless of species. He said that humans could not work effectively in a place where others were held against their will. Vextara agreed, and ordered the liberation of every prisoner. On the braking station, the transformation of the facility began immediately. Former guards and prisoners worked together to convert torture chambers into classrooms and meeting rooms. The holding cells became quarters for beings who chose to stay and learn about human culture and philosophy. Amy Foster led engineering, teams that included both humans and aliens in redesigning the station's systems for cooperation rather than control. The new technologies they developed were more efficient and effective than anything either species had created alone. Dr. Carter established a medical school where human and alien techniques were taught together. The healing methods that emerged from this collaboration were more advanced than either tradition could have achieved separately. Beings from across the galaxy came to study these new approaches. Ryan Brooks created communication networks that connected the former braking station with worlds throughout the region. His systems allowed different species to share information and coordinate peaceful cooperation. The station became a hub for interspecies dialogue and cultural exchange. Carlos Rodriguez trained security teams whose job was to protect rather than control. These mixed species groups became models for peaceful cooperation that were copied on worlds throughout the galaxy. The former prison became one of the safest places in known space. Peter Hayes organized cultural exchange programs that brought representatives from different species to learn about human values and share their own traditions. The station became a center for education and mutual understanding rather than conquest and control. Betty Walsh expanded her research programs to include scholars from dozens of species studying the principles of peaceful civilization. The work they did together advanced understanding of cooperation and social development throughout the galaxy. Vextara became a student rather than an inquisitor, spending his time learning about leadership through service rather than dominance. He studied human history and philosophy with the intensity he had once devoted to breaking spirits. The former High Inquisitor became one of the most effective advocates for reform within the Zephyrian Empire. The changes spread far beyond the braking station as word of the transformation reached other worlds. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians began asserting their independence and demanding to be treated as equals. The Empire faced a choice between continuing their failed methods or learning from the human. Example. Jake often met with Vextara in what had once been an interrogation room but was now a comfortable office. They discussed philosophy, leadership, and the future of interspecies relations. The alien who had once tried to break Jake's spirit now sought his guidance on building a better civilization. The humans had achieved something that no other species had managed in the long history of the Zephyrian Empire. They had not only avoided being broken but had transformed their captors into believers in a better way of life. The braking station had become a symbol of hope and cooperation throughout the galaxy. In the end, the humans proved that true strength came not from the ability to endure suffering but from the capacity to find meaning in that suffering and use it to help others. They showed that the greatest victories were won not through conquest but through conversion of hearts and minds. The Zephyrians had tried to break the human spirit and ended up worshipping it instead.